Would each candidate please introduce yourself in 1 minute, so get that clock ready. Give a 1-minute summation of why you are running for governor.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. I'm Joe Avellone. Thank you, MassEquality, for hosting this important forum. The LGBT community has made great strides in recent years, finally gaining the civil rights that every person deserves. And yet we know we still have so much work to do. You'll have to look no farther than the recent St. Patrick's Day parade. We know that old prejudices and old belief systems die hard, but ultimately they will give way to reason and to the love that we all share as human beings, but we have very much work to do. I'm running for governor because I want to better the lives of every person in our Commonwealth. I've been focused on the issues that will help the working men and women, new jobs based on new job skills, closing the achievement gap in our schools, and making sure that every school is a safe and supportive environment for every child, treating drug addiction as a health issue, not a crime, and also making sure that every person has access to affordable health care, including every member of the LGBT community. I look forward to working with you to make our state a better place. Thank you very much.
Hi, thanks Peter, thanks MassEquality. I'm Don Berwick, and I'm a pediatrician and an executive. I'd like to be your governor. That's because with Washington in gridlock and people losing trust in the ability of government to solve problems, the nation needs a beacon. It needs a place that shows the progressive agenda can deliver for people. This campaign, my administration, will be founded on principles and values: social justice, equality, and compassion. That's what made our country great. You're the civil rights struggle of our time, and I'm proud to support you. I'm proud to support the Equal Access Bill for transgender people in public accommodations. I'm proud to support increased housing and security for homeless youth, 40% of whom are in the LGBT community, and I'm proud to support anti-bullying efforts and more. We pledge allegiance to the flag. We say, with liberty and justice for all means all. Social justice, equality, compassion, that's what we hear from you in the campaign, and that's what I'll serve you with as governor. Thank you.
So thank you. I'm Attorney General Martha Coakley, and I'm the first and only Attorney General in the country to challenge the Defense of Marriage Act, and by the way, win. I've been proud to do that. I've been proud since my time in the Women's Bar, when in liberal Massachusetts, we did not allow gay parents to adopt children or to have foster children either. I've been proud to officiate at one of my best friend's wedding when I told her, don't go to California, Nancy, because you and Donna can get married in Massachusetts, when we overturned the 1913 Act. And I've been able to sit with a family waiting to testify, as I did live for the 2010 transgender rights bill. Those are important bills, but our work is not over yet. And I will be proud as your governor to work, as I have as Attorney General, with other governors across the state, across the country, to make sure that we continue our work on making sure that everybody has equal rights across this country. Thank you.
My first interruption. The candidates, if you could just come a little back from the mic, or move the mic forward. It's distorting a bit, so proceed.
Does this sound okay?
Sounds much better.
Hi, I'm Evan Falchuk. I'm the United Independent Party candidate for governor. I'm calling for smart, brave reform of our politics, our economy, and our government. I'm running because I believe that everyone is equal, that everyone's civil rights must be protected, and the government must spend our money wisely. We need a new framework in order to do it. I admit that I can't know the stress and pain of being stigmatized and discriminated against just for being who you are. And I know that this kind of cultural divide can lead to bad policy decisions. So in a time when so many legal barriers are being broken down, we must confront the reality that in too many places, discrimination against LGBTQ people remains socially acceptable, particularly against transgender people. We have to talk openly and freely about the rich continuum that is gender identity gender expression, sexual orientation. We have to confront health disparities, youth homelessness, and insufficient cultural competency of state services. And as governor, you must be able to speak to people who say, I don't care, as a way of avoiding these difficult challenges. So we have an opportunity to change the public's mindset around these issues.
Okay.
And I look forward to talking to you about the specifics today.
I have to remind everyone, we need to pay attention to the red sign.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Steve Grossman, and my values can be summarized by the 4 words that are inscribed on the front of the Supreme Court of the United States: equal justice under law. And I have a track record on the issues that matter so much to the LGBTQ community. My wife Barbara was the first straight member of the MassEquality Board. I've served from the beginning as a member of the advisory board of Fenway Community Health Center, continue to serve in that capacity. 15 years ago, when I was chairman of the Democratic National Committee, I created the first ever Gay and Lesbian Caucus and appointed the first ever full-time director of Gay and Lesbian Affairs at the DNC. In 2012, when former MassEquality Executive Director Mark Solomon called me and said, would you reach out to every former DNC chairman so that we can find it in our hearts and in our heads to make marriage equality part of the plank of the Democratic Party at the convention? I did that, and the results were obvious. I look forward to working with you. I have a track record being governors about leadership. I hope I've demonstrated that leadership conclusively to all of you. Thank you so much.
My name is Juliette Kayyem. I have a career in public safety and security, but began as a civil rights attorney in the Department of Justice when an assistant attorney general named Falchuk led that division. I brought the federal government's first anti-bullying complaint against a school district that was letting the boys harass the girls. And was involved with the historic legislation after Matthew Shepard and James Byrd to get the federal anti-hate crimes legislation. It is not just words for me, it is about action. We talk about Deval Patrick and his legacy. My style of leadership is to believe that there's no finish line, that there is no sort of we're done here. Massachusetts is about constantly pushing forward for the progressive state that we are, and the obligation of the next governor and the next generation represented by so many of you is to keep pushing. The challenges we have ahead, bullying, the veterans who we owe in the LGBT community who served us so amazingly, public health and public housing. Those are challenges for the next generation. I look forward to working with you on them.
I'd like to introduce my running mate, Shelley Saunders. Stand up, Shelley, wave to everybody. Today, she's Shelley's coming forward. I'm in this race to advance a biblical worldview. I'm probably the only candidate in this lineup that does not agree with the LGBT political agenda, but I hope to be able to show that we can have a civil disagreement. Thank you.
Hi, with that, I'm Jeff McCormick. From my perspective, by the way, I'm on the far left, for those of you there. I wanted to talk to you as a father of 3. I want my kids to grow up in a safe environment at home, in school, and ultimately in the workplace. I want them to grow up without discrimination. I want them to grow up with equal access. We have been a leader in the country and in the world. We need to continue to do that. But we have to recognize we have a lot of work to do. Equal access is very important. People mentioned our youth population, especially the homeless youth, our aging population. Let's not forget the demographics. These are all serious issues. And we need a governor who is going to talk the walk, but walk the walk every day of our lives. And I think we're going to get there here.
Okay, we're now going to begin with the first of what I hope are 8 questions that will be addressing to all of you. Massachusetts has long been on the vanguard of LGBTQ rights. Governors from both sides of the aisle have used the corner office to champion cutting-edge initiatives to advance justice and equality for the LGBTQ community. How do you plan to use your role as governor to make Massachusetts the best place for LGBTQ people to live, and how will you tout these initiatives across the country? How will you use the governor's office as the bully pulpit? Joe, let's down your end. Here we go.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, I think the governor has a powerful position, and we've seen how Governor Patrick has been so effective in using it. First is our own administration needs to have zero tolerance for any kind of discrimination, around health, around benefits, around jobs in the state government and beyond it. Second, I'm going to have a LGBT summit yearly to understand the evolving positions and create an agenda, an LGBT agenda from the governor's office that we will use in the legislature to make sure we keep advancing the agenda. And finally, I will use the bully pulpit. Massachusetts is a wonderful example of a progressive state that can show the rest of the nation, and I will showcase that at every opportunity. Thank you.
I'll make sure that the voice of the LGBTQ community is represented in my administration. Power matters. I'm concerned as a physician and pediatrician about the stresses that a lot of members of this community suffer, and I'm going to make sure that the mental health services, support services that help people through transitions in their lives are built up. They've been cut down in this Commonwealth, and we need to build up mental health services. I will support the rights of families of any construction. I know as a pediatrician, healthy children can be raised in any family, no matter what the structure. As the head of Medicare and Medicaid, I got to implement the federal regulation that, for example, created visitation rights for same-sex couples in hospitals. They were denied that. After we got done, they have those rights now. I'll fight every day for those rights, and every single right. Remember, all means all. Thank you.
So I want to thank all of you, because we would not be where we are in terms of progress without your willing to speak out, push all of your elected officials, make sure that even at personal risk, sometimes your personal safety, for the last several decades, you have said we want to be part of what's happening in Massachusetts, we want to be part of what's happening around the state and the country. And I recognize that, as I've seen in my time in public service since the late 70s, early 80s, that your voice is what has made the future possible. So we still have work to do together, and I know whoever is governor, I hope to be your governor, but I know that you will make sure you hold our feet to the fire on healthcare disparities, to make sure that, as I learned back in the early 2000s, working with Rebecca Haig, we had to do better on the needle exchange and make sure we address those issues. We just passed the amendment to our bullying bill to make sure that, and we'll make sure it's implemented in the corner office, that LGBTQ children get all the help they need to be good students and have a good future. Thank you.
There are a number of practical things. There's the LGBTQ, the Mass Commission for Youth, laid out a pretty thorough agenda of items that need to be taken care of. As governor, I'll appoint, I've said, an assistant secretary. It's someone who's a program manager. Anytime you're trying to implement complemented work inside of a big organization, you need someone in charge of quarterbacking and make that happen. And that will be a big part of my agenda. But also at a larger level, you need to have a governor that's going to make sure that every young person in this state feels safe and secure and able to reach out for services that they may need. You want a governor that's able to look at a kid and say, you know what, you're okay. It's okay that you were born with being the way that you are. It's perfect the way that you are. And it needs to be heard from the highest levels in our government. It needs to inform policy, and it will absolutely motivate me as governor.
So Peter, you said that we are again and again a leader on issues that are of concern to the LGBTQ community, and that's true. But on the issue of transgender rights, we are not leaders. Every other state that has passed transgender rights bills has included public accommodations in their bill, in their law. We're the only one who has not done that. That's one of the most important responsibilities that I will take on as the next governor, to make sure that the public accommodations piece of that legislation that was stripped out of that bill I've always been publicly associated with that. I've always supported it, and I'll support it as governor, and I'll fight for it, and I will sign it someday so that Massachusetts joins the other 16 states in standing with the transgender community on each and every issue, including public accommodations. That is not a strong point for us. We need to fix that, and I will do that as governor of the Commonwealth.
As governor, I would focus the bully pulpit from the corner office in three important areas, given who I am and where my heart is. I mean, the first is obviously to speak up against discrimination. It is never minimize the impact that has from the corner office. The second, though, is I think we need better data, as many of you have concluded in a lot of the materials you sent us. The data about, for example, child suicide and other issues is really inconclusive. State government has to get better about that so that we can provide you with the information about what's happening in communities, about mental health services and healthcare. Finally, I don't want to just talk about defense. The LGBTQ community is an asset for the state, and we can draw people from around the world to come visit, to come to school, to do sports conventions, whatever else. So I want to use, the communities of sports and travel, recreation, schools, and the arts to draw the rest of the world and the 49 other states that may not be as good as us here, and to use this community as a magnet. Because it's not just bad things; it's also an asset for who we are as a state.
I would, as governor, I would ban LGBT propaganda to children. This is a law that I advocated for in Russia. They've adopted it. It's going to be successful for their societies. There remains no objective proof that homosexuality is innate and unchangeable despite decades of effort, which means that it is an acquired condition. We must assume that that's true. And if that assumption is true, then it's extraordinarily irresponsible to be treating our children as guinea pigs in a massive social experiment. They should be protected from the promotion of homosexuality as good, normal, and an alternative choice for themselves.
Mr. McCormick.
There are several things I would like to do. One is focus on enumeration to make sure that we're spelling out the fact that this community needs to be served well, that it has to be a real part of the conversation and cannot drift below the surface. As a technologist, another thing I would like to do is explain to people how technology can be used to create communities. And that takes a lot of dialogue because there are a lot of isolated people out there, and everybody needs community. And I'm especially focused on the youth as it relates to that. So that is very, very important to me, and we've been extremely effective in doing that with many kinds of communities within our companies. It exists, and I think we really ought to embrace that with much better healthcare outcomes.
Okay, thank you. I'm now going to immediately overrule myself, and I'm going to ask Mr. McCormick the next question. I'm going to just go right back down. Before we get down there, Mr. Avellone, could you, when you answer, please use Mr. Berwick's microphone? Yours is not performing well.
Sure, it's the microphone.
There we go. Very good. This is a second question the state treasurer has touched upon, but let me articulate it more fully. Do you support non-discrimination protection for transgender people in public places or accommodations? If so, how do you respond to arguments opposing these protections that provoke controversy and allege public safety issues? Mr. McCormick.
Absolutely, I support that. It actually makes my skin crawl to understand how some people can take a segment of our population. You know, if you grow up Catholic, can someone not bake me a cake because I'm having a Catholic wedding? If I'm having a bat mitzvah, you know, it doesn't make sense to me how someone can selectively discriminate in our society at all. So, to me, this one is an absolute just no-brainer.
Mr. Lott?
Discrimination that's based on race or ethnicity or nationality is completely irrational because those things are morally neutral. But sexual conduct is not morally neutral. It has serious public health, sociological, moral implications, and it is perfectly rational and reasonable to exercise discrimination on those grounds. So all the arguments attempting to compare race with homosexuality and transgenderism are just simply comparing apples and oranges. I think transgenderism is clearly, self-evidently dysfunctional, and that it is simply insanity for our society to be embracing it as if it's a normal variant of human sexuality. We should be helping people to overcome this, not encouraging them to persist in the delusion.
Ms. Kayyem?
Thank you, Peter. Absolutely, I would support the inclusion of transgender. Let me just be clear. The transgender issue, we can respect other viewpoints. That we're on the right side of history here. Anyone who has lived the last 20, 30, 40 years knows that we are on the right side of history. There is only one way forward in Massachusetts, let alone the United States. It is going to be to include transgender, non-conforming gender, however you want to describe it in these anti-discrimination statutes. We should be ahead of this. We are not. I would support it. I have 3 children who are growing up in a very different world than I certainly did in the 1980s. They get it, and you get it, and we'll just make sure that Massachusetts legislature gets it.
So let me just expand upon what I said earlier. I think the best way to combat those who oppose this position is to point to the other 16 states that have these provisions already in their laws to see how well they work. Or if they want to point to people closer to home, they can take a look at what we've done in Salem recently, or in Amherst, or in Northampton, or in Boston, or in Cambridge. So these laws are beginning to be implemented on a municipal basis, and they're working, and working very effectively. And also, although he's not here tonight, I cannot stay silent when the nominee of the Republican Party for governor of Massachusetts has consistently opposed the transgender bill and called this a bathroom bill back in 2010, has never pulled that word back. I say, shame on you, Charlie. We're going to send you back to Swampscott, twice defeated candidate for governor.
Yeah, I absolutely support that law, and if it ends up on my desk, I'll sign it. The science of sex, of gender, of sexual orientation is something that's been developing very quickly. And there are many areas in which we haven't been able to keep up, and the law is one of those areas. And always when there's been scientific advancement, there are those who stand athwart it with ignorance and ideas about how it's not natural to believe in science, but it's truth. And that is what we should be. That is what we should be about. But there are many areas when we think about the health disparities that transgender people face, that the state has a role to play in making sure that standards of care for people as they're going through a transition or as they're seeking medical care are being diffused throughout our medical system. It's an area that exists in many different areas of medicine, and especially in this one that's such at the cutting edge of new science.
Thank you. Attorney General Coakley.
Thank you. So those who are ignorant, or those who would prey on other people's ignorance, stir up fear, as they do, as several people have mentioned, by labeling the bill that is accommodation, that is fair. I do support it. I think that we can and should pass it. And to marshal the arguments against it, I think you have to identify the ignorance that has labeled it something because they know it will strike fear in people's hearts. People don't understand people and things. They're often afraid of them. So it is our job, as it is with you, to explain what this is about. That we have very strong laws, constitutional and otherwise, in Massachusetts that say we don't discriminate against people. We believe that in Massachusetts. And furthermore, we do more than not discriminate. We try to be welcoming. We try to be inclusive. And this particular legislation, when explained to people what it does, absolutely people understand it. That is our job moving forward, to explain it and pass that bill, we can get rid of that ignorance here in Massachusetts.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Berwick?
I'm very proud that three of the great champions of LGBT rights in our legislature have endorsed me. Representative Denise Provost, Senator Jamie Eldridge, and the chair of my campaign is Senator Sonia Chang Diaz, who's a sponsor of the Equal Access Provision, and I stand proudly with her on that. Transgender people are subjected to particular forms of stress in our society. There are 97% report harassment in the workplace, 60% report harassment generally. They have 25 times the rate of suicide and depression as others in our society, and it's time to help those people, transgenders, join the rest of the community with full, absolute rights. The whole idea that the rights we're talking about are to be given or withheld by someone else offends me. You started with those rights, no matter who you are in this community, and you have them. They're not to be given. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Avellone.
Is this microphone working?
Yeah. Sounds good.
So, oh, it was just the microphone. That's good. I completely agree with the bill, of course, and people have spoken eloquently already about the outrage that I think we all feel that we would have to explain ourselves here. I know young people who are transgender, and the idea of the hurt, the isolation, the confusion that they have growing up with barriers put in front of them to do things that are perfectly normal is reprehensible. So I will certainly talk the talk about explaining this. That's what a governor needs to do. But then I will walk the walk. So everything I could do by executive order, whether it's in the State House, whether it's in all government buildings, whether it's in the universities, every place I can make this happen without the legislation to show people that the sky didn't fall. That would be the way that this would move this the most rapidly, and I would pursue that vigorously.
Okay, thank you. I hope I'm not premature. I want to compliment everyone. We're doing a good job of keeping ourselves on schedule. Listen, for the third question, let's begin with Mr. Falchuk, move to the left, and then we'll jump down to Joe Avellone. I think you all are bright enough to follow that. Here we go. May 2014 is the 10-year anniversary of marriage equality. Yet state data shows persistent disparities for LGBTQ youth, especially for LGBTQ youth of color and transgender youth. What do you see as the most urgent needs of this vulnerable population? And how will you measure your success as governor in addressing these disparities?
The most urgent need on a practical level is the high levels of youth homelessness. We can't have that. And rates of homelessness in Massachusetts have been going up during the current administration. That's obviously the wrong direction. When you look at the statistics around LGBTQ youth homelessness, so many of them are homeless because they've been kicked out of their homes, because their parents haven't been willing to accept them. It's a horrible, horrible thing to imagine going through as a young person. The state has an ability to help. There are great organizations that are doing wonderful work, but they don't get a lot of state funding. So we've had wonderful progress from a policy standpoint in Massachusetts in passing laws to help people facing these kinds of challenges, but not enough funding, in support. I've been very proud to support organizations that do this kind of work. I think it's great how generous the people of Massachusetts are with their money for these things, but the state has a role to play, and it must.
Thank you. Treasurer Grossman.
Oh.
Left, that's right. Sorry, Mike.
Building on Evan's answer, because he's absolutely right about youth homelessness, I think that it's absolutely critical that we recognize that when a state that is as progressive as this one, and we consider ourselves to be a progressive state, has cut its funding for mental health services since 2009 more than any other New England state, that a population of young people that needs mental health services, that needs behavioral health services, that needs services related to substance abuse, we have cut those programs. We need to increase those. These are challenges that youth feel and find themselves dealing with every single day. I'm very proud of the governor, who has $38 million in the budget this year for a variety of services, many of which directly affect LGBT youth and homeless youth. And I think that's a budget that we can build on. Even during tough economic times, we have to recognize that our most vulnerable populations need to be served on mental health and behavioral health, and need to be funded adequately?
I believe a lot of this can be addressed through focusing on kindness. The bullying that occurs against many students who are LGBTQ is unacceptable. It's unacceptable as a legal matter, and as I told you earlier, I brought the federal government's first anti-bullying complaint against a school district. It was the football players against the cheerleaders, but it had a similar focus, which was schools and the governments that give them money have a responsibility to make sure that kids are kind to each other. And I think we can do a lot about keeping kids in school, keeping communities focused on these children, so that they remain part of our communities, that they belong to the school districts. And I also think, straight children of gay parents are also facing discriminations or focus that we can address as well. But it begins with focusing on kindness, and I think government has a big role to play on that, both through lawsuits, budgets, as well as the corner office and what we're saying.
Frankly, I agree that kindness is what the kids need most. I don't think it's kind to affirm them in a dysfunctional sexual identity. Children's lives are fluid, and if an adult decides that they want to self-identify as homosexual or bisexual or transgender, that's their choice. But we shouldn't push that on the kids. We should assume that they have the ability to overcome that problem. I was a street kid myself, and I knew a lot of people that were struggling with this. Most of them did not want to have a homosexual orientation. And if they had had a chance to have counseling for that, then they would have taken that. So I also, regarding bullying, I don't think that we should be having bullying policies that force all the kids to be pro-gay when we could solve the problem by just simply teaching them to respect each other despite their differences.
Mr. McCormick.
I'd like to address the mental health issues on a little bit deeper level. Kaiser Permanente did a huge study that there's a lot of resistance to offering appropriate support in the mental health area, and they actually just opened it up to a large segment of their population. And oddly enough, everybody received treatment, and the cost only went up 10%, but the benefits of all of that mental health went up well over 10%. So basically, it was free. So this is one of those areas that, getting back to looking at the richness of data and looking at what we can do with technology and just getting out of this paradigm that we're stuck in, would have huge benefit to the healthcare of people. And this is across the entire population. And that's really one of the places I think we ought to go.
Mr. Avellone.
I had the pleasure of serving on the board of the Boston Healthcare for the Homeless, and it's a wonderful organization, one of the finest organizations, and I had a very good view then of the tragedy of youth homelessness and the rising number of homeless youth, unaccompanied youth. We have to address this, and a very high proportion are members of the LGBTQ community. And for the reasons that you might suspect, so we've got to have more capacity in the system. We've got to acknowledge that this is real and that we have to address it. And so I think that has got to be the biggest. I also agree that the mental health issues around transgender in particular, but LGBTQ generally, are not well addressed. And as we bring up mental health funding, which I completely agree, we will need to address that. And finally, job discrimination. I mean, these are young people trying to get their lives started. And if they can't find a job, or if they get turned down for jobs, even today, even with the laws, we need to be more aggressive to make sure that doesn't happen.
This is Poverty Awareness Week for my campaign. The whole campaign is focused on poverty. I've been visiting services around the Commonwealth. I was in a homeless shelter yesterday, which has been flooded with demands for beds because the mental health services have been cut, and people who need treatment in other kinds of contexts can't find that kind of treatment. That has a special resonance with kids who are on the streets and need help, a lot of whom are LGBT. We've got to restore these services. It just is not the Commonwealth we need if we don't have those services widely available. In our schools, kids, if you feel safe, and we need training in our schools so that professionals there understand how to deal with children under these kinds of stresses. These were my patients, and I saw the effects on self-esteem, depression, and despair in their lives, and that we need to end that cycle. I am proud that Senator Sonia Chang-Diaz, my campaign chair, is the sponsor of the anti-bullying legislation that passed our legislature last week. We need to extend that kind of security so these kids can reach out for the help that they want and need and feel proud of themselves.
So I agree with Evan that homelessness is the most obvious and the most dangerous. I've seen these kids working in the criminal justice system when they become victims, and sometimes they're brought in as defendants. They are out there and it's very dangerous. So let's dial back as to how that happens and why that stigma and why they're not accepted results in homelessness. So we have to deal with that, but we also have to look at, as we did with the bullying bill, which I was proud to work on, to get passed with the legislature that paid attention, I think, to being fair to all kids. And we worked for 18 months in our committee to take testimony from folks, and very articulate testimony from teachers and from kids themselves who said there's certain kinds of kids who are more likely to be bullied and the impact on them will be greater, particularly LGBTQ kids, which is why I work with Sonia Chang-Diaz and others to get that amendment passed. We need to implement it, and it's why I also support in our programs for better schools, support counselors for all kids, whether it's 2nd grade or 3rd grade or 8th grade, who need extra help because they're being bullied or they're not doing well in school. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Madam Attorney General, I'm going to have you begin with the 4th question, which I'm about to ask now, just to thoroughly confuse our cameraman up there. A number of other states have recently clarified that their state laws prohibit insurance companies from discriminating against transgender people by excluding coverage for the health care they need. Would your administration direct the Mass Division of Insurance to take similar action in the first 100 days of your administration?
I don't need a minute for that answer, Peter. The answer is yes. I think it's incredibly important that we are able to provide inclusion for those medical needs, and the answer is yes.
We're going this way?
Yep.
The answer is still yes. Medically necessary is medically necessary, and insurance policies in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts ought to cover this.
Peter, I'll make your job a little bit easier. The answer is absolutely yes.
We're in moderator heaven right now.
Do we get to add the seconds onto our next answer?
No.
Yes, yes, and yes.
Ms. Levin, I suspect your answer is not going to be the same.
No, actually, my answer is yes, as long as the money is being spent on reparative therapy.
A hook. Mr. McCormick.
Well, I think with this being your board, we've already carried the motion, so we can move on. But it's what I said earlier about the insurance study, the data is there to back it up. It's just a smart decision. So yes, the answer is yes.
Mr. Joe, Mr. Avellone?
I would like to out-yes all my yes colleagues here, but also just say it's still theory until insurance covers it. And when insurance covers it, it starts to be reality. We have to make it a reality. Until then, it's just theory.
And last but not least.
Yes, of course. I don't know what else to say. Every time we try to split a hair here and say, well, people in this community don't quite get the right, you lose me. We're all together, we're all one, and equality means both.
Okay, for the 5th question, we're going to begin with Ms. Kayyem. And just to change things up, rather than moving to the left, we're going to move to the right. Only in terms of direction here. But new HIV infections have declined by half over the past decade in Massachusetts, which is a huge success for public health. Unfortunately, many HIV prevention and care providers have been victims of this success as funding has declined dramatically as well. New infections are up in Massachusetts for young Black, gay, and bisexual male adolescents and young men in general. How will your administration build on the success the Commonwealth has had to date against HIV/AIDS which is increasingly affecting Black and Latino, gay and bisexual men and transgender women?
I believe, we can't put our heads down to AIDS, even though there has been tremendous progress, in particular because of the populations it's now impacting. So it begins first with prevention and public education. It begins with reaching out to communities throughout the Commonwealth through access points that may not be government, it may be NGOs and nonprofits, schools, and community leaders reaching out for safe sex, essentially, and to ensure that people are acting safely, and also, as might apply to drug use, to ensure that people have access, I have to be honest with you, with drug use and needles that are not infected. We know as preventative measures these work, and they have worked to cut AIDS, and it's essential. Secondly, though, is treatment. As a state, we can buy in bulk. We can think of creative ways of working with the private sector and the medical community to reduce the cost of these very expensive and yet life-saving drugs. So those are two important ways to go forward on this important issue.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Treasurer.
First, I can't think of a more important event in terms of awareness and dealing with the HIV/AIDS crisis, and I'll still call it a crisis, than the announcement today that Carl Shortino is leaving the state legislature and is going to become the new executive director of the AIDS Action Committee. That is a singular decision on his part, absolutely critical, and I think for awareness, for education, for treatment, for advocacy, you can't have a better person than Carl Shortino in that kind of a leadership role. Second, I'm moved to suggest that we have a vast array of very successful nonprofit organizations that serve the LGBTQ community, including dealing with HIV/AIDS. We need to make sure that those nonprofit organizations are well funded and are well taken care of. And third, I noted that the governor had included $38 million in his current budget. It's a little bit of an increase over the previous year, not enough. But those kinds of investments by a governor who's willing to take leadership can have a huge impact on HIV/AIDS care and treatment.
Thank you.
Public health is a heck of a thing because it works. You know, if you invest in all the prevention and all the other things that go with it, you get the results downstream. And if you stop investing in it, the bad things start to happen again. So here we are in a state that we like to think of ourselves as the most advanced in every single area you can imagine in the country. And we're funding HIV/AIDS prevention less than before, and rates of it are going up. Much like we're funding smoking prevention less than before, and rates of smoking and all the related illnesses are going up. Much like in a related area, the state cut, starting back in the 90s, and it's continued, mass rental housing vouchers, and homelessness has gone up. So you look at that and you say, we know what the right answer is. The question is, why aren't our leaders doing it? And it won't change until we have leadership that's willing to talk about it openly and commit to taking that kind of action.
Thank you.
So we are victims of our own success in some respects because, like many issues that we think we resolved, this one hasn't been. And in a state that has the best research, the best hospitals, the best medicine, we should be the leaders in the research around preventing it, the research in providing the mitigation of it and solving it. And certainly one of the things I've always thought that states can and should work to get faster approval of drugs, to make sure that we get waivers for people if we have drugs that will work instead of making people wait for a very slow federal government, often not just on DOMA, but on many other things that affect people's lives. We should be the leader in Massachusetts in doing that. It's why back in the early 2000s, I did believe that it was important, despite the criminal law at the time, to say we should support clean needles and work with the AIDS Action Commission then to do that. We can't let up the fight on this as a public health issue. It needs funding. We should do it here in Massachusetts.
Thank you.
I started and for 20 years grew a nonprofit organization called the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, IHI, that works all over the world on healthcare improvement, and HIV/AIDS care has been one of the big foci of that organization for my entire time there. We ran one of the first national collaboratives to improve HIV/AIDS care in the country. It's a paradox. We've made tremendous progress, but as the problem has gotten less frequent, solving it has gotten harder. So we have to reach out more. And in the LGBT community, there are special barriers around access to health care and willingness to come into health care. We need to double down on our investments on HIV/AIDS treatment and care in order to make sure that we're solving the problem, not just hiding the problem in the nation. That we're backing away from the kinds of supports in the social safety net that allow people to get into care, make sure they have the mental health services that supplement the physical health services is a mistake. We need to double down our investment in fighting this important disease. It's still with us.
I think we have two major problems that are intersecting. We have to remember that public health is an ever-changing thing, or I should say it needs to be constantly ongoing, because there are new cohorts of people that move through. And in this case, there are new cohorts of young people becoming sexually active, moving through, that didn't have the advantage of massive education 10 years ago. So whether it worked 10 years ago, it did for that cohort, but we have to continue to invest in it. So I think we're seeing that, and that we have to put back the things that we know worked before and make sure that we keep them at the level. Just because the rates have gone down doesn't mean that we don't have generations of new people that are coming of age and need the same kind of education and other kinds of preventive measures that we know worked in the past, condom programs, and the like. And the other thing is we have drug use way up, and drug use using needles as well. As people addicted to prescription drugs go on to the cheap heroin that we know is here, and that also has contributed. And I think the intersection is a very dangerous intersection. I've been advocating for an office of recovery that will essentially create a much higher response to our drug addiction problem, and hopefully will weigh into our ability to deal with the other aspects of this, the education aspects of this as well. Thank you.
When I started my molecular biology research in the early 80s, it was in the field of HIV, and it was a Pandora's box at the time. We have made so much progress, but again, we have a lot further to go. We need to take a page out of what the Clinton Global Initiative did in Africa, and one of my advisors was one of the main players in the largest antiretroviral company in the world, now part of Mylan, and they figured out a way to make it work for the manufacturers and also work for a huge population. And by the way, it is not a wealthy population. If they can figure out how to do it in Africa, we sure as hell could figure out how to make sure that these drugs are available and that there's no resistance to getting them to people, because it's a disease and it needs to be treated. So the playbook is there. We just need to look at what the world is doing to solve the problem.
In 1992, my family took in a former homosexual man who was dying of AIDS, and we nursed him the last year of his life. I was with him in the hospital the night that he died. We were very close. And Sonny would want me to tell all of you that he acquired AIDS through voluntary anal sodomy, which is the primary transmission process of AIDS, and it's a perfectly preventable form of transmission. That it's no paradox that all this money and all this research has gone into AIDS and nothing has changed. You are never going to stop AIDS until you stop treating homosexual sodomy as a civil right and start treating it as a form of conduct to avoid.
Okay. We are ready to move on to question number 6, and in my effort to mix things up and further confuse the cameramen, we're going to begin with Dr. Berwick, and I think it's time to resume the move to the left. Here we go. Given the 2013 Center for Disease Control's report indicating that LGBT individuals experience domestic violence at rates equal to or greater than their heterosexual counterparts, and the fact that funding for LGBT-specific domestic violence services has been inadequate since 2009, how would you raise the profile of this issue as governor, and how would you increase funding to serve this population? Doctor?
I think it's part of the general problem of providing services to support healthy families and mental health in our Commonwealth. This has been cut severely As I said, the homeless shelter that I visited yesterday had its peak of funding in 2009, and has seen nothing but decreases since then with increasing demand. We need to reinvest in the kinds of services that allow families of any kind of configuration to get the kind of help they need. I was involved in a program that I want to mention because it's worth your study, called Family Wellness Warriors. I lived in Alaska for a year and a half and worked at Indian Health Service. And that's a very troubled population, not just with LGBT issues, but other mental health issues. That's not a troubled part of the population. Family Wellness Warriors build strength and capacity in families very consciously with strong investment. They've cut abuse levels dramatically with that kind of intervention. We're being very silly in the Commonwealth to be cutting out exactly those services that allow families to find the kind of help that they really want to have, and we need to reinvest in those services, and as governor, I will lead that reinvestment.
Okay. Attorney General?
So domestic violence, particularly before awareness on marriage equality, is a huge problem that remained something that people, if people didn't know they were in a relationship or that they were gay or lesbian, didn't want to come out, didn't want to talk to police. I'm talking 70s, 80s, 90s. Historically, as we have recognized partnerships and recognized marriage equality, it has been easier to work with police departments and the criminal justice system around the importance of protecting those relationships and the safety of people in those relationships. I've worked now as a prosecutor and as Attorney General with the Gay Men's Domestic Violence Project. They do not get enough funding. We could argue that we don't do enough around preventing any domestic violence, but certainly in a community that has not had access to or feels safe with police in communities, in the court system, we need to do a lot more than we've been doing. We've made some progress. We have to research, spend more money on it, and support it. I believe that we can do that.
It's one of many areas where, again, we've got good science and understanding about the things that need to be done, but not the budgetary will to actually fund them at levels that are appropriate. I think there's broad-based agreement on this. So that, again, the question that I ask in a state where we've got a Democratic governor and a Democratic legislature, and we still can't get these things, what's going on? There's money that's being allocated for purposes that you'd say, boy, couldn't we use that money better? That's being used, for example, to renovate the governor's office, to go to domestic violence programs. I mean, I hate to make it so flip, but it's really the reality of how are we making our priorities this way? How can we talk with such strong words about the importance of preventing the plague of domestic violence and yet not put up more of the state's money for that purpose? So to me, that's what it means to be talking about smart and brave reform, is to call out when we see instances where we're not living up to our principles.
Thank you.
So clearly, I think we'd all agree that more public resources would make sense. I mentioned earlier the governor's budget, which does contain significant resources for domestic violence prevention. It's not enough and needs to increase. Herein, I think, lies an opportunity for what I would call the public-private partnership, because there are extraordinary organizations. I'm involved with at least 3 of them: Second Step, Casa Myrna, and Respond, which in different parts of our community are dealing with issues of domestic violence that affect all victims, including those in the LGBTQ community. And finally, I think it would be appropriate to look at additional legislation that might do a better job at protecting victims of domestic violence. I don't suggest that the legislative route is the solution, but it is certainly part of a package of activities in which a governor has to be involved with and has to lead the discussion. Pick your priorities, lead, work with the legislature, improve the quality of those victims of domestic violence. That is a priority, should be a priority of any of us.
I have spent a career making the safety and security of individuals and communities of paramount importance. So this issue of domestic violence and domestic violence prevention is at the center of what we need to do and what a governor needs to do. As the only candidate who's had executive service in both state and federal government, I know the tools of a governor. And the 2 I would concentrate on in this issue, the first would be data collection. We don't know what we don't know. We do not require police departments to say what's going on in the household, what are the dynamics. So we need to get better with data, because then data is going to drive whatever policies or legislation we may want. And I am convinced that we don't know a lot of what is going on because we are not demanding data collection. The second is training. I mean, I've learned working with police departments that a lot of times it's about training and sensitivity to the communities. And I think we can go very far in pushing training for police officers and communities in addressing this issue.
Thank you.
Lefties, no matter how much money you give them, they always want more. Everybody on this panel, except me, has a solution of raising more money in taxes to be able to fund things that shouldn't be funded in the first place. Money for domestic violence prevention and relationships that should never have been endorsed in the first place. Why would we be propping up homosexual relationships instead of encouraging people into healthy, normal families? It's completely backwards. Let's not waste our money.
Shh, 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 shh. Please, we're all doing so well here.
I should get an award after this. Someone owes me a martini.
No. As I said, we were doing so
I
well.
thought Lefties only had white wine, you know.
I think what you've heard is absolutely right. Anything related to healthcare issues, mental health issues, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. There is an awful lot of data and richness of data that we don't collect. We don't know how to collect it. As someone that deals with a lot of what's called metadata, which is patterns and data about data, a lot of the answers are there. We just have to have the systems to collect it, understand it, utilize it. We will come up with the answers. We have extraordinary brain power in this Commonwealth around this particular area. We just don't use it the way we should.
It's lonely at the end, Mr. Avellone, isn't it?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, there are two dimensions of this. There's the criminal justice and how it deals with this issue, and then there is mental health. On the criminal justice side, I really would bow to the Attorney General to know whether or not we're doing enough with the law itself, whether or not our laws themselves, whether or not we are doing enough with police training. Certainly, if we're not, we ought to. But the mental health issue is huge, and that does get more to the root cause, and we certainly need mental health and counseling capabilities that aren't there. We've taken $90 million out of the mental health budget, which was underfunded to begin with before the recession, because we deinstitutionalized and never built the community programs that need to be there. So we are sorely underinvested in mental health, as several have said. We've got to put that back, and we will, and that will start to get at the root cause of this, which I think can then make the dimensions around the criminal justice system less. I'm not going to do that with raising taxes. I'm going to do that with controlling healthcare costs so we can spend the money more effectively where we need it versus where we are spending it today in our healthcare system.
Okay, thank you. Let me move on to question number 7. And Mr. McCormick, I can't serve you a martini here, but I can serve our question number 7. We'll resume our drift to the right here. Currently, sexuality education across the state is inconsistent, meaning that some students are still receiving abstinence-only sexuality education, which is already proven ineffective. Do you support mandatory comprehensive sexual health education for every school district that is age-appropriate, culturally competent, and inclusive of sexual identities? If so, this question's a mouthful. If so, how will you educate the public that this education is necessary for all students?
I'm a father of an almost 10-year-old, 11-year-old, and 12-year-old. And frankly, as a parent, you know, my kids don't come with direction books. You sort of make it up as you go along. And I have to tell you, the more they know, the easier it is in this particular area. So yes, I would support education as you suggest. I don't know who my kids are going to be or what they're going to be. All I know is it's our job to love them and support them in every way possible. which is also why I cringe about this homeless issue in this particular area. So, you know, for me, it's, again, with my children, it's a no-brainer. I mean, I have 3 data points. I've talked to my friends. They feel the same way. We want our kids to be aware of the world around them. That's our job as parents.
Mr. Lottie?
Yes, we have a crisis of youth promiscuity in our society today. I don't think anybody can deny that. And we're not going to fix that by doing more of the same. Look back to the way things were in our grandparents' generation. We did not have this kind of problem. The difference is that we taught family values, and we need to get back to doing that. You're only going to see a further escalation of sexually transmitted diseases, serial relationships among kids, experimentation with every kind of bizarre perversion, as long as you keep going down the track that you're going.
Thank you. Juliette? Oh, Ms. Kayyem, I should be consistent here.
I was hoping for that martini now, but anyway. I also have 3 children and believe, like Jeff, that the information that they need is information that they should be getting from schools about the world that they're entering. But I want to talk to you about this not just as a parent, but as a governor. When you talk to employers in this state and you talk to employers around the world, what is the quality they want most in people? It is not closed-mindedness. It is not a belief that the world is static. It is qualities of nimbleness and welcomeness and an acceptance that the world is really diverse and accepting. And those are the qualities that employers want. And so if we raise a generation of children that believe in the rights that you all are committed to and the rights that so many of us are, that is not only good for the world, it's also good for our economy.
Thank you.
So speaking of the role of a governor, I think when you are dealing with an issue that could be controversial, when different people have different views, and even though you describe the kind of education, Peter, in very careful terms as to how appropriate it would be, I think the role of a governor is to travel the state, go to every one of the 40 Senate districts, and have town meetings with people living in those communities and impress upon them the overwhelming importance of this kind of education to the long-term health and well-being of the people of the Commonwealth and of these young people. And we do have a challenge. We have a limited number of hours in the day in which we're educating our children. We have a whole series of things that they must learn, called MCAS, or Common Core. And we've got to make sure that when we incorporate this kind of education, which I fully support, in the curriculum, it's done in a way that is appropriate, that the local communities and educational leaders support, where parents support, and that is the role of a governor, to make that case strongly, unequivocally, but with a good listening heart.
Thank you.
So that it should be the way that you described it, Peter, in the question. The legislation that is pending right now, that I hope ends up passing, says that if a community has sex education, sexuality education, that's age appropriate, that's medically accurate, and so that's a step forward, but it means that there are still communities that, for whatever reason, aren't interested in providing that kind of education. So it's enormously important, because this is plain old good education, good public health, for the governor to go to those communities, because most people in Massachusetts are actually pretty smart and pretty enlightened on these topics, and they want to see if their kids get educated that way. But not everybody, And that's the hard work. When I said that you meet people that will say, hey, I don't care, I'm fine with whatever people do, I guess that's pretty good if they don't care, but they ought to care. And it's the job of our governor to be a leader who will help them understand how important it is to care.
So thanks, Peter. I'm not sure I know what the answer to this question is. I think it's a tough one. I think Massachusetts has 1 foot in the 21st century. We're very progressive. We have 1 foot in the 18th still. I know growing up in a Catholic family, going to Catholic school, at some stage when I was 30, I said to my parents, how come you didn't really tell us about sex? And my mother said, well, I knew you girls read a lot. And we haven't moved too much beyond that. Obviously, our schools should give our kids good science, but I'm not sure we teach them much more than about biology and chemistry, and that's fine. But this issue about who you are sexually, what your gender identity is, what your gender is, I've grown up worried about gender discrimination, and I worry about all kinds of discrimination, personally and professionally. But this is a tough issue for everybody, and I do think developing the sensibility for parents to be able to talk to their kids and to have kids who need that material to read, to have access to it. We need to do that now because we're not going to do it immediately through our schools. But good question, important one for us all to think about.
Okay.
I would support this improvement in education in our schools, although I must say I have 4 children, and I sometimes wonder who was teaching who about this. They live in a world that's informing them about things that I need to learn about. Let me just zoom out for a second to a somewhat larger question in which this one is embedded for me. As we have developed our new approaches to education and improving education, there have been some losses, and the losses have to do with standardization and teaching the test and narrowing the idea of what it is to have a child ready to enter the future and be a steward of the society they're in. We need to be preparing kids for citizenship, for participation in society. This is part of that to me, and I think we need to have a somewhat broader conversation about broadening the way that we're educating our young people to join society instead of regarding education as ticking a box or passing a test. It's much, much more than that.
I agree with the bill. Definitely, we need education widespread that is comprehensive, age-appropriate, medically valid. And not only will our children benefit from it, but I also believe that it will weigh in on the bullying that does occur. I think at least it will get at the ignorance that allows some of the bullying to occur. I applaud the anti-bullying bill. In fact, my good friend, long-term friend, and co-chairman of my campaign was the House sponsor for the anti-bullying bill, Alice Peisch, along with Sonia. So I'm very proud of that, but actually getting to a root cause is more important, and that's education. I think this not only will help people have more healthy sexual lives, ultimately, but it may also remove some of the ignorance that happens at those ages that could reduce bullying in our schools as well.
Okay, thank you. As we move on to our last question, not forgetting that everyone gets to sum up here, I think we will mourn the lack of Republicans here by swinging to the left. We'll start with Mr. Avellone. Here we go. Massachusetts has taken unprecedented steps to address the needs of LGBT elders, including designating them as a population of greatest social need in creating the first ever statewide LGBT Elder Commission in the country. How will you build on the leadership of Governor Patrick and the state legislature to address the needs of LGBT elders and ensure that they can access culturally competent and non-discriminatory elder services?
Well, first of all, I applaud what Governor Patrick has done and the awareness that he's created around this, and I do believe that we need to move from here in much more, in concrete ways and in expansive ways. And one big way is through our Office of Elder Affairs to make sure that we have and require comprehensive training for caregivers of elderly patients around LGBT and the special needs that community sees and the kinds of discriminations that happen to them as they become elder. This is a big change. It's a big change for caregivers, and they need training, and they need the sensitivity to understand that they're dealing with this population and to not discriminate in any way. So I think this is the first thing. This is one of several vulnerable populations that our state government has a role in taking care of. We have to make sure we have training, and training until you almost can't take it anymore, to make sure that everyone in our state government or that we're contracted for operates correctly.
Thank you. Doctor?
It is partly a skills issue. We've left elder care and long-term care behind in our society as areas to invest in the workforce that serves them. I totally support the Domestic Workers Alliance and want to empower people who help elders get the skills and knowledge and incomes that they need in order to be proud of their professions. We need to reach out to them to give them help. I have been a defender of rights of elders. I ran Medicare, and in that role, and Medicaid, in that role we took on, for example, over-sedation of patients in nursing homes, which was a rampant epidemic in this country. We started a process, still underway now, to bring that to a close. We need to protect the rights of people no matter where they are, and that includes elders in our community. I'll treat this mostly as an educational challenge so that the workforce that helps elders is prepared to help them with the skills they need to deal with their rights.
Attorney General Coakley.
So in my experience, people listen to other people who have had the shared experience, who are empathetic. And that's true with kids who have been bullied, who take that on and talk to other kids. It's true with veterans, talking to veterans. And I think in this area where people are living longer, where we're going to have more identified LGBT seniors, that in the great organizations we have, it's important at the government level, at the not-for-profit level, at every level, to identify that kind of peer counseling, that leadership in the LGBTQ community who are seniors, who will give us the guidance, give everybody the guidance as how best to do this in those groups and work with us in developing policy, but also work with the people. Those are people who will talk to them. I think we can do that. I think that's the best way to do it.
So the commission is great, and I think the effort to train people is very important. We have a larger problem with our senior population, not just in the LGBTQ community, and that is that pretty much no one has the kind of coverage they need to pay for the care they're going to need in the last years of their life in a nursing home, if that's where they end up. We like to say we have universal coverage, but we really don't, because seniors are becoming bankrupted by the cost of that care, and then they end up on Mass Health to pay for their care, and Mass Health doesn't reimburse enough to the nursing homes. And there's a bill in the legislature now to try to update Mass Health reimbursement just to get it up to 2010 levels. It's now at 2005. So it's another one of these areas where we can say how strongly we feel about caring for our seniors and making a difference in their lives, and particularly to say we need to take care of seniors in communities that have faced discrimination, but we have to fund it appropriately. We have to pay for the government we say we want.
So I was reading and studying the LGBT Aging and Health Project conclusions, and I read some things that I didn't know. Number one, that nearly half have a disability, nearly 1/3 report depression. Number two, that almost 2/3 have been victimized 3 or more times. Number three, that 13% have denied health care or received inferior care. Number four, about 1/3 do not have a will or a durable power of attorney for health care. Things I didn't know, but I thought were really important. I would make the position of Secretary of Elder Affairs a full cabinet position, reporting directly to me as governor, so that I would have guidance on a regular basis, not through the Health and Human Services Secretary, but directly to me. We need a full and comprehensive curriculum that deals with the needs of older adults in the LGBTQ community. We need to find a way to coordinate services, bringing healthcare professionals, government leaders, and nonprofits together. This could not be a more important issue. You need a leader in the governor's office and a partner as the Secretary of Elder Affairs to execute that plan.
I think we have to view the challenges of today as opportunities for better ways to deliver government services. As someone who has had to work in complex situations, breaking down the barriers of secretariats when I was state government, or boundaries of 351 cities and towns, this issue, the issue of the aging LGBTQ community, is one that cuts across so many boundaries, whether it's transportation or housing, public health, or veterans. Think about our veterans returning. And this is one in which only a coordinated approach and thinking about the delivery services as being about not the silos or thinking of government as a hammer to a nail, but as harnessing the collective goodwill. I think we know the solutions. I think the commission came up with the solutions. It's about training, certification of healthcare workers, unionizing, delivery of better services, education. It is now getting government to actually deliver those answers, and that can only be done with a respect for the complex management issues ahead for this issue.
We should not be basing our elder care system on the basis of sexual orientation. Every elderly person should receive the same level of high care regardless of their situation. We shouldn't be creating special categories of special rights for people who happen to fall into this particular identification or lifestyle. And so this is just another money grab, and I'm against it.
Mr. McCormick.
When I talk to elders in this situation, they can be in 60, 70-year committed relationships, and they have to turn their whole lives in a different direction because neurological diseases hit everyone, folks, and people need care. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this is going to be a massive housing and nursing facility issue. And I've looked at this, I've looked at it from a business perspective, from a philanthropic perspective, and let me tell you, the collective intellect of the people in the seats here is certainly higher than the collective intellect here. We've got to listen, and you have to be creative, and we have to come up with a solution here, because as I alluded to in my intro, this one is a bit of a ticking bomb just because of demographics, and we've got to get on top of it.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to move on to what I'll say will be our closing statements. I thank everyone for their self-restraint and discipline. Let's keep it up for the last 8 minutes. I'm going to pop around a little bit here, so I'll call on everyone separately. And let's begin with Mr. Live.
Well, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me this evening, and I just want to close with a scripture from 1 Corinthians chapter 6, 9 through 11. This is the Bible. Maybe you don't believe the Bible, but I do. And it says, "Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor homosexuals will inherit the kingdom of God. Such were some of you, but you were washed, you were sanctified, but you were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus and in the Spirit of our God. I care enough about you to tell you the truth." And I want to point out that this scripture also indicates that there were ex-gays in the church from the very beginning.
Okay.
Separation of church and state.
Okay, thank you for reminding us of that. Mr. Avellone.
Amen.
Thank you, Peter. And thanks once again to MassEquality for hosting this wonderful forum on such an important issue. I do think we should take a moment and just reflect on how far the LGBT community has come and the gains that they have made. The civil rights gains have been spectacular, and Massachusetts has certainly led the way. We know we have much work to do, and in fact, it's harder work. So we have to work harder and longer, because now we need to change attitudes, prejudices, old beliefs, even old religious beliefs. And that takes a long time. Ultimately, we know we will. We know that reason and love will prevail, and all of us will be able to live the individual lives that we were promised as American citizens and that we know we should as human beings. I want to be the governor that can help make big change, that can help improve the lives of every single person. Certainly, I've talked about education and jobs, but changing these attitudes is going to be key, and I hope to champion that and work with you all the way so that 5 years from now, we aren't having the discussion about many things that we've talked about today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Falchuk.
Thank you. Again, I'm Evan Falchuk, and I founded the United Independent Party because I believe we need smart, brave reform of our politics, economy, and government. I believe what you've heard me talk about tonight are the kinds of things that most voters want to see part of our public policy agenda, but they don't see a way to do it through the two parties. I believe it is possible to create a new party that will allow other smart, independent people to get into our legislature, to find a route into public service they may not see open to them today, and to bring about the real, meaningful change and reform that we must have. Please go and visit. You can see more at falchuk2014.org. And I really thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCormick.
When I look at everyone here, I don't see an LGBT community. I see a father, I see a mother, I see a friend, I see a fellow parishioner, I see a coworker, one of my CEOs. I got married 100 yards from here in a Christian church by two priests. They happened to be gay. They were very, very close, longtime friends of mine. And I think my marriage is still official. I have to tell you, my whole life is bringing people together. And when I think about who is in our companies. We embrace talent, we embrace creativity, we embrace hard work, and we have people from all walks of life. And let me tell you something, it is also smart business to be blind to anything else. That is the way you build the best organizations and the best teams. So that's how I'm going to approach it.
Dr. Berwick.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your courage and your clarity. The whole Commonwealth is in the debt of people who are fighting this struggle. I'm a progressive. I believe that government has an essential role in helping us create the communities that we want to have. I'm thinking tonight there are really two kinds of challenges running for governor. You all want to try it sometime. Some are technical, what roads and rails we should have, how to have an energy economy that works, what to do with climate preparedness, higher education. These are technical problems we've got to solve together, but some are moral. The government has an obligation to pass a moral test, and we are talking about a moral argument here. We established a nation using words like we're created equal, liberty and justice for all, equal justice under law. Every single time a transgender person has trouble getting access to a facility, every single time a youth has to fear violence because of who they are, every time we make someone feel bad because of who they are, every time a child's bullied because of who he or she is, we fail the moral test. We need to reestablish social justice and equity and compassion as foundational and fight for that, and I will fight for that, Mr. Governor.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kayyem?
My name is Juliette Kayyem. I am also the daughter of a Lebanese immigrant family. My Sittu used to carry around a Ziploc bag of the papers of her journey. And to her dying day, she used to pull out that bag and she would say two words: I belong, I belong, I belong. They are words that animate me in this race and words that animate so many of you. I am a Lebanese Christian married to a Jewish man, raising 3 kids in a Jewish household. This is the Massachusetts I know. This is the Massachusetts you know. We have spent a lot of time today talking about discrimination and things that are troubles for your community. So I want to end very optimistically about what everyone here and what all of you bring to the table. You make Massachusetts the most welcoming state in this nation. It is a value. It is something we are at a competitive advantage at when other states turn on this community, when other nations criminalize it. And so I want to empower all of you because you belong. Thank you.
Thank you. Treasurer Grossman.
Thank you. Giving another part of the Bible equal time, I'm going to quote the book of Deuteronomy, where it says in Deuteronomy 16:20, "Justice, justice thou shalt pursue." When we pursue justice, when we have a commonwealth that is at its best, doing its best to leave no one behind, extraordinary things happen. We haven't talked about the economy, but if you read Richard Florida's book called The Rise of the Creative Class, it lays down one fundamental principle, that societies that are open and accessible and welcoming are societies that succeed. We are creating an amazing commonwealth every single day. Not you, not we. We are creating an amazing commonwealth. And we're creating a commonwealth because of marriage equality, because of openness, because of the willingness to change, because of the willingness to confront new, bold, imaginative ideas. We've been a laboratory for experimentation and innovation for 400 years. We keep doing that and leave no one behind. With the right kind of gubernatorial leadership, nothing can stop us economically. And that's one of the great lessons of the last 10 years in this Commonwealth.
Attorney General Coakley.
So something very quick about separation of church and state, because just when you think you're making progress, we had a case pending in Worcester County where the Catholic Church said, we're going to sell a building, and they made a deal to sell it to a couple, and then when they found out the couple was gay and might use that facility for gay weddings, they reneged on the deal. Well, we said that's wrong, and we went into court to say that is also against the Constitution. And so I think that the history of the civil rights here, which has moved forward in Massachusetts, has been a little bit about the law, but a lot about you, a lot about the people involved, the people who were willing to say, I'll put my name on that suit. to challenge back in 2004 in the Goodrich case. The people who are willing to come forward to challenge the Defense of Marriage Act, put their lives out in public and say, you know, we're veterans, we're married, we want to be married together. That's what this struggle has been about. We're not done yet, that's clear. But the courage for you and the leadership that you have shown in making sure that everything is fair has led Massachusetts, and frankly, look what's happened across the country. It's exciting. We're going to continue to work on it together. Thank you.
Thank you all.